My name is Marilyn. The courtroom was deathly quiet, a stillness that felt like the calm before a storm. I sat at the witness table, my military uniform crisp and my spine straight. Beside me, my friend Lily sat, as steady as a rock. Across the aisle, my sister Lisa flipped through her notes with trembling hands. Her husband, Tom, leaned back, his jaw clenched, whispering to his lawyer. My father stared straight ahead, as if the ceiling might cave in if he moved. The judge took his time, poring over page after page of evidence, deed transfers, notary suspensions, financial trails, wire logs, and audio recordings. The stack of documents on the table in front of him grew taller and taller, until it resembled a wall rather than a case file. Finally, he stopped, adjusted his glasses, and looked directly at the bailiff. "Lock the doors," he said, his voice low but clear. "No one leaves this room." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. She didn't say a word, didn't even look at me. She just sat there, frozen in a truth she wasn't ready to face. My father didn't move a muscle. He just folded his hands and stared off into space. Lisa went rigid, her shoulders rising slightly before dropping, as if something inside her had finally given up. The judge turned to me. "Colonel Marilyn, in your opinion, was this a coordinated effort to conceal fraudulent activity under your identity?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "It wasn't an accident. It was planned. And it wasn't just about taking the house. It was about erasing me completely." I could feel the weight of the room shifting, a subtle but final change. The judge nodded once and turned to Lily. "You may proceed with sentencing recommendations." In that moment, I knew the damage was done. Now came the reckoning. The judge read the sentencing without fanfare, just a steady stream of facts. Tom Miller, 12 years in federal prison for logistics fraud and abuse of federal contract systems. Tom didn't flinch. He just stared at the table, his hands folded tightly. Lisa Miller, 6 years for forgery, misrepresentation of property, and real estate fraud. Lisa didn't cry or protest. She just lowered her head, as if finally realizing that the game was over. John Smith, 10 years without parole for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity misuse, and unauthorized government access. My father didn't react. He just looked past me, as if this wasn't happening to him, as if nothing had ever been real enough to shake him. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just took a deep breath. Outside, the air felt colder than I remembered. Reporters gathered at the courthouse steps, their cameras ready and their questions primed. I kept walking. A few veterans stood near the sidewalk. I could tell by the way they stood, shoulders squared and eyes level, even though the years had bent their backs and faded their uniforms. One of them reached out as I passed. "Colonel Marilyn," he said, his voice steady and quiet. "You reminded them we still stand." I nodded, not out of pride, but out of recognition. I didn't walk away with a house. I didn't want it anymore. What I carried was heavier and truer. They had tried to replace me with paperwork and lies, but in the end, I had something they couldn't forge, my name. I found myself at the Defense Archive, a place I hadn't been to since before my deployment overseas. The air inside smelled of polished stone and old stories, the kind that didn't need to be told to matter. The security guard nodded when he saw my badge, a silent gesture towards the far corridor, the one with the black granite wall. I walked slowly, letting the stillness wash over me. Every name carved into that wall had been earned, some through loss, some through sacrifice, and some through a quiet determination that refused to be extinguished. My fingertips traced the grooves of my own name, Colonel Marilyn, Cyber Command, 1998 to 2023. I didn't need the letters to prove anything. But seeing them there, etched into something immovable, meant more than any deed ever could. I thought about the boxes, the forged signatures, the frozen bank accounts, about Tom's smug smile, about Lisa's silence, and about the way my father had never once said my name in court. And yet, here it was, in stone, without apology, without permission. They had taken the house, but they couldn't take this. Lily called later that afternoon. The state had officially dissolved the shell company, Starlight Holdings LLC. The title to the house was frozen indefinitely, and all pending claims had been denied. There was nothing left to fight about. The battle was over. I stood by the wall for a while longer, long enough to feel the weight of everything settle into place. When I finally stepped outside, the sky was clear and wide. There were no crowds, no cameras, just a gentle breeze and the steady rhythm of my own footsteps. I didn't walk away with property. I walked away with something far more precious, the truth, intact, the silence, earned, and a clarity that didn't need to be shouted to be heard. But it all started when I returned home after 25 years in the military. The cab pulled up in front of the house before I even had a chance to catch my breath. I hadn't told the driver the address, but he read it from the paperwork in my lap, still warm from the discharge clerk's printer. Just the name of the street made my chest tighten. The house looked the same on the outside, white siding, a narrow porch, and a stone walkway cracked where our old dog used to dig. But something in the air had changed. The hydrangeas were gone, and so was the flag. The porch light glowed a faint amber, soft as a memory, but it didn't feel like a welcome. It felt like a surveillance. I stepped out of the cab and stood still for a moment, my boots crunching on the gravel. No one opened the door. I pressed the intercom, and the long delay made my heart race. Then, a flat, familiar voice came through. I thought maybe I'm calling the police. It was Lisa. I told her I had just come back, that I had served my country and now I was home. But she didn't seem to care. She said I didn't live there anymore, that I had left and disappeared. Her face appeared in the upstairs window, her eyes cold and hard behind the glass. "This isn't your home," she said. She didn't ask if I was okay, or if I had somewhere to go. I watched as she picked up the phone and called the police. I didn't run, and I didn't shout. I just stood there as the cruiser turned the corner, its headlights sweeping across the front lawn like searchlights. When the officers stepped out, one of them paused when he saw the ribbons on my coat. Recognition flashed in his eyes, but procedure took over. "You're not on record," the younger officer said. The gate clicked shut behind them. I didn't fight it. I just walked back to the cab and sat in the back seat, staring at the porch where I used to fall asleep on summer nights. The light was still on, but no one opened the door. The next morning, I met Lily at a diner near the old highway. She was sitting in the back, just like she had been since college. She didn't ask how I was, or offer any condolences. She just turned her tablet towards me and tapped the screen. "You need to see this," she said. The listing was for my grandfather's house, but the name on the owner line wasn't mine. It was a company I had never heard of, Starlight Holdings LLC. I stared at it, trying to make sense of it. "I didn't sell anything," I said quietly. Lily tapped the screen again, and another document appeared. It was a property transfer filed 3 months ago, with my name signed at the bottom. "See it?" she said. "Seller Marilyn Smith." My throat went dry. "That's not my signature," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I called you. I ran a notary scan, and this one has been flagged in 2 counties for irregular filings." I looked at the document again. The curve of the letters was close enough to pass at a glance, but it wasn't mine. "They forged it," I said. Lily nodded. "And if they forged this, what else did they fake?" She slid a folder across the table. "That's what we're going to find out." I parked 2 blocks away from the house. I didn't have to, but I wasn't ready to get any closer. The house looked colder this time. The porch light was off, and the hydrangea bushes that my grandmother used to tend to were gone, dug out down to the roots. A plastic sign leaned crookedly in the lawn, "Private listing. No agent contact." It didn't look like my home anymore. It was just a property, a number in someone's ledger. I sat in the car and watched the windows. Every corner of the house held a memory: the telescope my grandfather had bought second-hand, the swing he had built from leftover deck wood, the tin box where we had practiced Morse code. I could still hear his voice from the porch, saying, "You'll need to know how to speak even when they won't let you." But now, even the porch railing had been replaced. I wondered if the new boards knew what they had erased. A note was wedged under my windshield wiper the next morning. It was typed in all caps on plain white paper: "If you're really serious, meet me at Alley 9 at 9:30 p.m. Come alone." There was no signature, no explanation. I stared at it for a long time, half expecting someone to be watching. But the street was quiet, with no movement behind the curtains and no shadows on the sidewalk. That night, I left everything traceable at home: my phone, my badge, and even my coat with the rank pins. I wore black, pulled my hood low, and walked the blocks quietly, just like my grandfather had taught me. The alley was narrow and smelled of rust and engine oil. It was between two abandoned storefronts, with chain-link fences on either side. I waited for 10 minutes before a man stepped out from behind a dumpster. He was in his mid-50s, with calloused hands and grease under his nails. "I knew your grandfather," he said. I didn't answer. He nodded towards the street. "I'm Jake. I work at the auto shop down the road. I've been here long enough to notice when things aren't right." "What kind of things?" I asked. He scratched his jaw. "Black vans with no plates show up late at night. They always back into the alley and unload crates. No labels, and they're real quiet about it. It's always the same guy, your sister's husband, Tom." I felt my stomach knot. "What's in the crates?" "I can't say for sure, but they're not furniture. They treat them like they're a risk." He stepped closer. "People around here talk. They say you're unstable, that combat messed you up. But I don't believe it." I didn't look away, and I didn't thank him. I just asked where the vans went. "I came back to the alley just after midnight. I was wearing a black hoodie with a camera clipped under the collar and boots that were soft enough to blend in with the gravel. I crouched behind a half-collapsed fence where Jake had told me to wait. Just before 1 a.m. I heard the low rumble of an engine. 2 black trucks coasted into the alley without headlights, no markings, and no plates. They backed in smoothly, like they had done it 100 times. Tom climbed out of the second truck. His movements were brisk and confident, like this was just another day at work. He didn't look around, he just pointed to the back entrance of the house and barked something too quiet to hear. 4 other men moved quickly, carrying box after box, all the same size. There were no labels on the boxes, and they made no sound when they hit the ground. I filmed everything: the timestamps, the faces, the gestures. Then I moved around the side of the fence towards a vent near the basement. The metal slats were rusted but open enough. I slipped a microphone through and pressed record. At first, the voices were muffled, but then one cut through, low and certain. "If the officer finds out, we sever the tie. Immediately. No backtracking." I froze. That voice didn't belong to Tom. It was gravelly, deliberate, and familiar. It was my father. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the heat rise in my throat and the pressure in my jaw. I didn't cry, and I didn't shake. I just kept recording. He wasn't covering for them, he was directing it. By the time I pulled the microphone back and slipped away, the trucks were gone. The alley was quiet again, but the silence was no longer clean. It was stained with a truth I couldn't unerase. I didn't sleep that night. By sunrise, my apartment had become a war room. Lily sat on my couch, her hair pulled back and her glasses low on her nose as she flipped through property records and court filings. On the phone, my old friend Ryan's voice crackled through the secure call. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, but as soon as I forwarded the files, he replied within minutes. "I'm in," he said. "You still store backups like you used to?" Better, I said. 3 encrypted drives, air-gapped. Good, he replied. Start uploading. While Lily organized the hard copies and prepared the court-ready folders, Ryan dove into the metadata, the timestamps, the document authorship chains, and the buried IP logs. He found that the notary's digital seal had been flagged 2 years ago for a forged DMV affidavit, and the same signature was on my deed transfer. Lily was building a timeline, and Ryan was tearing apart their trail. It didn't take long for the pieces to start fitting together. Starlight Holdings wasn't just a shell company, it was a funnel. Ryan traced midnight transfers from Tom's logistics firm into Starlight's offshore accounts. Short bursts of large sums of money, always around the same dates as the unmarked deliveries. This isn't just fraud, Lily said, flipping through the latest batch of filings. This is coordinated. This is deliberate. Ryan's voice came through quieter. I found something else. A lease agreement for an industrial warehouse in the next town, authorized 3 months ago. Your name is on it, authorized by your father. He hadn't just orchestrated the deal, he had done it using my clearance, my identity, and a forged signature good enough to fool anyone who wasn't looking. But we were looking now. Lily stood up and handed me a binder. We're ready, she said, and I knew exactly where we were going next. The morning air was sharp and still. I put on my uniform, not for pride or for show, but because I wanted them to see exactly who they had tried to erase. Lily parked at the curb, and I stepped out first. The house hadn't changed on the outside, but something in me had. No more hiding, no more watching from a distance. We walked up the driveway together, steady and silent. I rang the doorbell. Lisa answered. For a moment, her expression didn't register anything. Then she saw my jacket, the ribbons, and the binder in Lily's hand. Her face went pale, as if someone had flipped a switch. Lily didn't waste any time. We're here to serve you with a court injunction, she said evenly. Effective immediately. All property transfers, lease agreements, and financial activities tied to this address are frozen under federal order. Lisa didn't move. Her hand hovered in the air, as if she might slam the door. Behind her, Tom appeared. He leaned in the doorway, too calm, too rehearsed. You really want to play this out, Marilyn, he said. I met his eyes. We're not playing anything. His smile curled. You don't know who you're up against. I do, I said. A logistics fraudster who signed contracts with stolen credentials. A man hiding behind shell companies and forged deeds. His jaw tightened. Lisa shifted between us, like a cracked pillar trying to hold 2 walls apart. You can't prove anything, she whispered. Lily opened the binder and flipped to the first page. We already have, she said, handing her the documents. Lisa took them with shaking hands, as if touching the truth might burn her. We turned and walked away. There was no shouting, no theatrics, just the soft click of justice falling into place. And the sound of a door closing behind us. And that's how I found myself back in the courtroom, waiting for the judge to deliver the final verdict. A verdict that would expose the lies, the fraud, and the betrayal. A verdict that would restore my name and my honor.